You may be wondering why the words Wil Wheaton are on screen. I'll get to that in a minute. But first up, we all know who Elmo is, right? We all love Elmo. He's the cute little Muppet on Sesame Street who talks like a 5-year-old. Well, it seems like maybe not everyone likes Elmo. I'm not playing audio of this, I'm just showing the footage, but Larry David the other day decided to attack Elmo. Unprompted, by the way. He just came up and was tired of seeing Elmo on there. And this is, I think, in wake of Elmo making that tweet asking how everyone has been. And pretty much everyone's like, Elmo, you know that everything's miserable. And Larry David decided to do a bit that didn't seem to go over that well with most people. And, like, I think Larry David might have done just a tiny bit of an apology tour over it, but, like, who cares? He did a bit that didn't go over well. But it set some people off. And that's where Wil Wheaton comes in. Here we have a screenshot of, I think it's now a deleted thread on Facebook, because I was checking Wil Wheaton's Facebook and I couldn't find this thread up. He does have a response thread that we'll be going over in a little bit. But here is Wil Wheaton saying, so I heard about Larry David assaulting Elmo on live television, I think he means live television, but didn't watch it until now because I knew it would upset me. Holy shit, it's even worse than I thought. What the fuck is wrong with that guy? Elmo is like the best friend to multiple generations of children. In the Sesame Street universe, Elmo is a child who is currently putting mental health and caring for others in the spotlight. And Larry fucking David did that and thought it was going to be funny? What? What an asshole. What a stupid, self-centered, tone-deaf asshole. Full disclosure, all the time when I was growing up, my dad would grab me by the shoulders and shake me while he screamed in my face. He choked me more than once. He was always out of control, always in a furious rage, and always terrifying. I'm a 51-year-old man, and my heart is pounding right now, recalling how I felt when I was a little boy who loved Grover the way today's kids love Elmo. Okay, so this is, and I say this without memeing or anything like that, this is Wil Wheaton being triggered. This is legitimately, he has suffered child abuse. And seeing Larry David go after Elmo like that triggered his memories of him being abused as a child. And I am nothing but sympathetic to that. I think he probably should have kept this one in therapy because it does seem a little overblown. First off, kids aren't watching the Today Show or whichever show it was that Elmo was on. Like that's not a show kids care to watch. So it wasn't like Larry David was doing this on Sesame Street, right? It might have been a failed bit, whatever. But like, I can acknowledge, okay, Wil Wheaton, some people are going to find this cringe. I can fully sympathize with where you are at here. I don't know that I would have made this big post about it, and this is actually just a snippet of it. Somebody else, and apologize for the potato quality, but somebody else was able to pull the whole post, and I don't know that I want to go over the whole thing. It's more of just him being mad at Larry David. But there was a response here that actually really pissed me off, and it's Robert Evans saying, "Shut up, Wesley." Now, if you don't know who Robert Evans is, he is the host of the very good podcast Behind the Bastards, which I've been listening to a lot recently. He's a very, very insightful person. I don't know if he knows this, though. Wil Wheaton has been being told, "Shut up, Wesley," by abusive fans for 30 years. He actually very famously made a post about it saying, "Hey, I'm just going to start blocking people on social media who say that to me. It's never been funny. It's always been used to diminish and demean me. And considering that it's from a time in my life where I was being abused and groomed into Hollywood by my abusive parents, it just brings up a lot of negative feelings for me. And so I don't appreciate it, and I'm going to block you if you use it." I don't know if Robert Evans knows that story. I hope Robert Evans doesn't know that story, because if he does know that story, then he's responding to a man who is acting out of trauma by using a phrase that triggers his trauma. So, like, I really want to give Robert Evans the benefit of the doubt that he did not know that. If he did, that's incredibly fucked up. I'm not going to go over the rest of Wil Wheaton's rant here. He does have a response, though. Wil Wheaton posted a response to it, and I haven't read this response, but I pulled it up, and I want to see what he has to say. The story really ought to be about how a grown man behaved on live television, violently going after a beloved children's character without the consent of the performer. I think that's a fair argument. Like, if you're doing live TV and somebody goes off script, especially for, like, you know, a puppet segment, which, like I said, kids aren't watching the Today Show, but maybe some kids were. And, like, it does seem like Larry David's whole bit fell flat. Like, nobody really seems to enjoy it that much. Honestly, I think it would have been funnier if it had been planned, because that way they could have actually choreographed it. Because the way Larry David went about it, it looked, you know, very much like he's trying to hold back. And so it doesn't look like he committed at all. So anyway, but that's very obviously not where Wil Wheaton's going with this. That's just an aside here. And there really should have been meaningful consequences for his behavior, which he knew he'd never experience when he doubled down after being forced to issue a deeply insincere non-apology and laughing the whole thing off. I'm reluctant to say anything because the narrative set up by clout-chasing blogs and clickbaiting websites is some version of lol, this guy was super upset about a puppet, let's all mock him, which, well, yes, but that omits some rather important context. You may even call it the most vital context that would undermine the premise of the headline. But, you know, the last 48 hours or so have been eye-opening, and I wanted to take a moment to illustrate the consequences of that framing and acknowledge that speaking up for yourself and others can really bring out the absolute worst in people. Attached to this post is a sampling of the sort of things people have been saying to me the last 48 hours. Let's see. Oh, geez. Quite a few of these things. I'll check those out later. To be clear, they are massively outnumbered by people who saw exactly what I saw and had a similar reaction. To be clear, these toxic and hateful people show up in little groups, around 10 or so at a time, fling a bunch of metaphorical shit around the room, and run away just as quickly as they arrived. It feels very coordinated. It's the internet, you're a public figure, you're gonna deal with trolls. I think Wil talking about his mental health stuff and being vulnerable about it has been a positive. I don't think that means every single time something upsets you that you have to make a post about it, particularly a post saying Larry David is a bad person for having done this thing. Not everyone knows everybody's triggers. Now, granted, shaking a child, that seems like a fairly obvious one, so you might have an argument there. But in general, just because something triggered you doesn't mean that the person who triggered it was doing something wrong or even realized that that was a trigger. Your trauma and your abuse is important to acknowledge and to deal with, but it's also for you to deal with, and that involves, you know, therapy, which I'm sure Wil Wheaton is in. I don't know. It seems like he's decided that Larry David is this irredeemable monster for having done this, when it really just feels like he is transposing his feelings about his father onto Larry David. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze him or anything like that. I'm just saying, I think as much as I appreciate Wil Wheaton being open about his mental health struggles and about having been abused, I think there's a lot of value to that. I don't think there's value in attacking anybody who did something that unintentionally triggered you. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I weep when I see this sort of casual cruelty. Someone told me he wished my dad had hit me more. Yeah, that's fucked up. Fuck the trolls. Someone reduced my entire childhood of traumatic suffering to, wow, my dad yelled at me. Wow, yeah. You were vulnerable on the internet and people were awful to you, and that sucks. And the thing is, saying that sort of thing to me isn't going to make your dad love you either, buddy. I mean, just think about that. I was a little boy, a child just existing, and a grown man. My father, for no reason at all, would grab me by the shoulders and scream in my face while my mother stood by and made it somehow my fault. That was my reality. That's the terror I lived in every day. And my mother's solution to my father's abuse was to just try harder to make him love me. Okay, that's who these people are talking about when they mock my trauma or the pain and terror I experienced, the sadness, loss, and grief I live with. If I could change anything at all about what I wrote, I would reword what I said so people who have a vested interest in protecting a powerful celebrity couldn't tone police me and ignore the substance of what I reacted to. I would have taken the terrified child inside of me and soothed him before the adult I am spoke up in his defense the way nobody ever did for me when I was him. Okay, so you would have made it less about Larry David, is what kind of sounds like what he's saying. And like, that sounds like a reasonable critique of his own behavior here. And like I said, I don't think he did anything really wrong. I think it was a little over the top, and I can understand why people would see it as cringe. But I think there's something healthy about talking about your mental health struggles in a productive way. I don't regret what I said, and I'd say it all again, even if I hadn't been contacted publicly and privately by tons of parents who had to help their small children get through what they saw on live television, and my fellow survivors who also experienced a deeply traumatic memory where people like the ones in these screen grabs saw something harmless. The single most consistent sentiment is disbelief that there were zero consequences for what that man did, and the familiar pain that also comes with that reality for a lot of us. And now, just like when we were children experiencing abuse and fear, we're being told that we are overreacting, that it's somehow all our fault, that we're making things up, and that our feelings are all invalid because we didn't express them according to an ever-changing set of rules that we never get to see. I think that's fair. And maybe I'm guilty of that in this segment a little bit. I'm so grateful that my EMDR work and all the intensive therapy and recovery work I have done and am doing is working. I sincerely do not feel worked up by these comments, just disappointed at what they say about the state of the world. The gleeful spewing of raw, unfiltered hatred and mockery towards someone who barely survived a childhood defined by abuse and exploitation, their denigration of my humanity and lived experience isn't finding fertile ground inside of me to germinate, which is fantastic and something I'm proud to have accomplished. What happened to them? What happened to their humanity and empathy? As traumatized as I am, I would never tell someone who was treated the way I was by my parents that it was their fault or wish any additional suffering upon them. Yeah, I agree. Now, when I say that your trauma and your triggers are your responsibility, I'm not saying that it's your fault that you have your trauma and triggers. But the way that you deal with them through therapy is ultimately your responsibility because nobody else is going to be inside your head for you. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying I don't know that the post itself, the way that he worded it, was the most optimal way to engage, but that's okay. Like I said, I understand why he made this post. I understand he was triggered. I understand why people thought it was cringe. I didn't have a problem with it, other than it seemed like he went really hard on Larry David, who, as far as I'm concerned, just did a cringe bit himself. And yet, someone on my Tumblr thing, he said, the whole crux of this for me is the men. Men are too emotionally stunted. Men should be allowed to openly show their feelings. Wil Wheaton, a notable man, is vulnerable with his feelings. The men openly and viciously mock him. Y'all, what do you want? What do you actually fucking want? Yeah, that's a really good point. No, like I said, I appreciate Wil Wheaton. There was an interview that he did. He hosts The Ready Room, which is the Star Trek after show. There's an episode of The Ready Room after every single episode of new Star Trek. And there was an episode in season 4 of Star Trek Discovery where the character of Tilly decides to leave Discovery and become a teacher. And she, in that episode, talked about how she kind of had gone into Starfleet and done all this stuff because it was kind of the life that was kind of expected of her, but it wasn't something she ever really thought about if it was actually what she wanted. And now that she had these new opportunities, she decided to change her career. And this is a character in Star Trek Discovery doing all this stuff. And the actress who played Tilly was on that episode of The Ready Room, and Wil Wheaton was actually in tears talking to her because he felt seen by that scene. He saw so much of just the way that he, as a child actor, had been groomed into that whole environment, and how it was never something that he felt like he actually got a say in. And seeing somebody recognize that and take control of their own agency, he found value in that. And I was watching this, and I was just like, the actress looked a little bit uncomfortable because of him, because of how much he was crying about it. But like, I appreciate his honesty and his openness here. And people are going to call it cringe. And like, Lord knows, I have definitely seen Wil Wheaton be cringe. I was at BlizzCon several years ago, and he was hosting the costume contest, and he opened it with a 5-minute stand-up set that was entirely just one joke over and over again, which was how bad he was at Diablo 3. And I walked away from the stage because I didn't want to hear him keep going, and they were piping it into all the other halls, so I could not escape from Wil Wheaton talking about how bad he was at a video game for 5 minutes. But that's okay. I think Wil Wheaton, by and large, his advocacy is a good, positive thing. I think it's important to talk about mental health issues, and I don't think we should be dismissing it like Robert Evans did. Let's give him the... I didn't finish reading what he said. Speaking generally and very broadly, the men are clearly not okay, and I have no idea how to help the men get okay. I do know that having Larry David as some kind of aspirational example for the men clearly isn't helping. Is Larry David an aspirational example for the men? Like, his whole character on Curb Your Enthusiasm is just, like, an asshole. An asshole who does asshole things. I don't think that that's... like, it's funny, but I don't know that a lot of people are just like, yes, Larry David, that's who I want to be. But yeah, Wil Wheaton's final words, I think, are very important. What a messed up world we are in right now. Please choose to be kind. And I think I can leave it with that. Yeah, let's choose to be kind. Hey, thanks for watching. Your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. And drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the video. I stream Mondays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific and Sundays at 2, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a very special shout out to my Whaled Shark tier patron Ryan D and my Anemone friend tier patron Piftle Cakes. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.